Coming up on show 392, what we'll call the sickness edition, Volkswagen want to be a pioneer of sustainable mobility. Jaguar starts offering financing to boost the I-Pace sales, and an update on the Model 3 arriving here in Europe. Well, those stories and many more on today's EV News Daily. Good morning, good afternoon and good evening. In fact, wherever you are in the world, welcome to EV News Daily, Tuesday the 19th of February. It's Martyn here. Been through all the EV stories I can find and picked out the best ones to save you time as always today. Did something yesterday that's very rare for this podcast. I skipped a day. I'm afraid the man flu struck and still not feeling 1,000%, but well enough to be out here having a little chat with you. It's hardly going to take too much out of me, but my wife would call it a cold. I would call it man flu. We'll probably settle somewhere in between. If I can get through the podcast without sneezing or coughing or my voice breaking like I'm a teenage boy, then that will be a success. Thank you to myev.com for helping make this show. They've built the world's first marketplace about buying and selling EVs. I have a funny feeling it's going to be a busy year for myev.com. If you're in the USA, you can check that out right now. Let's start with the VW ID. No, we're not talking about a car that's hit the road. We're talking about what they want to do when the cars hit the road. It is fascinating, isn't it? How we talk about so many cars that are out right now, new features, make YouTube videos about them. And yet with the VW ID, a car that we're excited about, it's just there's so much waiting at the moment. And it's one of the most curious things that I think about with EVs in 2019 and moving into 2020 as well. There's so much pressing pause at the moment. There's so much jam tomorrow. There's so much pent-up demand to have more alternatives, more models on the market, that when they finally arrive, I can't wait to see what happens there. We finally got the first few, like the Jaguar I-Pace, the Audi e-tron soon, and I'll talk about the Jaguar in a moment, actually. And they haven't exactly set the world alight because they're premium cars that not many people can afford. So that's why we talk about the VW ID so much. Of course, Volkswagen, the people's wagon. They want to create an EV that everyone can afford or at least have a good chance of affording. And now they say that they have their entire value chain on the goal of avoiding emissions. Now, that's the only marketing corporate phrase, value chain, that I'll use in this story. Volkswagen say that the battery cells for the ID will all be produced in Europe, close to where the car is being made. The energy is going to be coming from green sources. More savings potential in the supply chain that extends all the way back to raw material is being looked at to help direct and indirect suppliers as well. The plant where they'll make the VW ID.1, the first one, maybe the Neo, whatever it's called, the plant in Zwickau is already using externally produced power from renewable sources. Unavoidable emissions in the manufacturing process are being offset in the meantime by investments in climate projects. As for charging, Volkswagen recommends the use of renewable energy like wind power and hydropower to charge your car when you finally get it. The new Volkswagen subsidiary Elli, E-L-L-I, or Elli, has recently begun to offer regeneratively produced electricity. It's called Volkswagen Naturstrom, which is new to me. I'm going to look into this. The IONITY fast charging network as well, co-created by Volkswagen and other car manufacturers, is going to be offering green power when you charge your car on the road. So, even though we haven't got a car to talk about, it's a statement of intent that VW are taking their credentials very seriously when it comes to climate. Hey, I mentioned the Jaguar I-Pace. Sales of the Jaguar I-Pace, the first all-electric car from the brand, haven't been strong in the US, but the automaker is now offering 0% financing on the I-Pace as a limited offer to boost sales, says Fred at Electric. Well, last year, Jaguar delivered about 6,500 I-Pace SUVs in Europe, in the first 9 months of the car being on sale. In the US, however, the vehicle only had a few months of sales last year. Jaguar delivered about 400 units, far fewer. Well, this year started very slowly, about 1,000 I-Pace deliveries globally, which seems low to me. Let's give them a benefit of the doubt. I'll give you the Jaguar sales blurb in a moment. I do gather that the weather has been particularly bad where these cars are made, because they're not made by Jaguar here in the UK. They are made by a third party, and which I believe is Austria. The weather has been crazy bad in terms of snow. So that is going to affect suppliers, it's going to affect storage, it's going to affect getting the cars out. I'm not making excuses, I'm just saying that's been the case. The Jaguar I-Pace has gone down very well in the videos, the first reviews that we've seen about the car. Like I say, though, it's a very expensive premium car as well, so not everybody's getting a chance to drive it now. Jaguar look like they want to give as many people as possible the chance to drive it. They say that the all-new 2019 I-Pace model's eligible for financing at 0% for well-qualified buyers in the US. Payments per month per $1,000 financed, regardless of the amount of down payment, can be as low as $16.67 at 0% for 60 months. All amounts shown are estimates, they say, in their calculations. The retailer sets the actual amounts. The supplies, they say, are limited. The customer must take a new vehicle delivery from stock by the 1st of April, and that's no April Fool's joke. So that's interesting. So the dealers are going to have stock, and if you want to do 0% financing and you're eligible, then you can do if you're in the US. I think that the leap that Fred Electric made is probably, it's a natural one to say that they're doing it to boost sales. And you could make a good argument they are doing that to boost sales. I would also say that every other model in the Jaguar lineup in the US had that 0% offer applied, and it was only the I-Pace, the only model that didn't have it. So you could say they were just aligning all of their cars to have this finance deal. You could also argue that if demand was strong for the electric car, that you wouldn't need to do that. People talk a lot about the levers that Tesla pull to get people to buy certain cars. So I'll let you make your own mind up about that. That segues nicely. Hey, by the way, no coughing, no sneezing, no voice breaking so far. Maybe I'm on the mend. This is a little update about the Model 3. One user on Reddit says, spotted one of the first Model 3 performance in Oslo, Norway. Of course, Norway, the EV capital of the world. That's great news. We know that they've been in Belgium. German deliveries have started. Another user on Reddit says the first Model 3s are now available in Italy, handing them over to buyers. Tesla's Model 3 on its way to becoming the next major disruptor in the auto industry in Europe, as everyone lost count of ships delivering these compact electric sedans from the US. Watching truckloads of Model 3s being delivered to different cities in Europe has now become a daily phenomenon as Tesla's working on their delivery plan, writes Auto World. And that's an interesting thing, because when it first began, people were tracking, and people still are tracking ships in San Francisco at Port 80 and heading to Europe and Zeebrugge, then around to Norway and heading to China as well. But there's just so many of them that we are losing track now. Auto World says that Tesla's currently only offering the long-range dual-motor and dual-motor performance versions of the Model 3 here in Europe, which are the top-tier variants of the car. The next more affordable mid-range is not available over here. Still, the number of deliveries is impressive, says the website. Meanwhile, Cleantechnica says that as it stands, customers are taking delivery in Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, France, Sweden, where else? Denmark, Austria, Spain. The floodgates are opening much faster in Western Europe than we saw in the US, says Cleantechnica. However, as Tesla is on a warpath to get the cars off the ships and into the hands of as many customers as possible, as fast as possible, and I would add to that, of course, they've got so much, they've learned so much in the last 12 months in order to be able to produce the cars, get them on the ships, get them over here, and the difficult bit seems to be getting them in the hands of customers in the most efficient way possible. And we'll come round to what is kind of the theme of today's show, which is timing. So many people said that by the time Tesla sold their Model 3 in scale here in Europe, that the big German automakers, of which I've had plenty, by the way, very nice Audi in my previous Audi TT, in my previous collection I've owned 2 Golf, so I'm a big fan of lovely luxury German cars. Everybody said by the time Tesla are here, the German makers would have the market saturated, and that's not true, is it? I mean, the e-tron still delayed as far as I know. If you are an e-tron member of the public, let me know. I just haven't heard from anybody yet who's actually got their car. We know 400 of them were registered in Germany last month in January, but we think they went to dealers, people who work for the company, managers, people who are just making sure that there's no rough edges left on the car. If you have heard about one in a normal person's hands, let me know. But even then, that's an expensive car. But hey, So's the Model 3. Let's not kid ourselves. The Model 3 is not a cheap car. Here in many countries in Europe, you have your value-added tax, your VAT on top of that, your sales tax, and the cars, being the performance versions or the long range, are still very, very, very expensive cars compared to what that money would buy you in a fossil car. So many different angles to this. Let's move on to talking about the e-transporter, ABT Sportsline, ABT, I think it's pronounced ABT, the Sportsline, the world's largest tuner of vehicles of the Volkswagen Group, especially Audi, through its ABT E-Line subsidiary, is introducing a very special version of the Volkswagen Transporter. It's called the e-Transporter. And boy, do I want one. It's going to be presented at the Geneva Motor Show, according to Inside EVs. ABT, I thought it was ABT, but then someone emailed me and said, no, it's as in Daniel Abt, as in that family that raced in Formula E. Abt offers the e-Transporter with either a single or a double battery. The single battery is 37.3 kilowatt hours. The double battery is 74.6 kilowatt hours. Ooh, now you're talking. In commercial or passenger versions, the bigger battery version seems reasonable, says Inside EVs, but the 250 miles of range still being measured on the old NEDC, which is wildly optimistic in any kind of normal conditions. I'll put a link to that article in the show notes if you want to read more. Two stories today to finish off about Honda, and we don't talk about Honda too much on the podcast, but we are looking forward to the Honda Urban EV coming to the Geneva Motor Show. That is the cute as a button city car, which we know they've confirmed is going to be premium pricing. I don't know any more details than that, apart from the car is going to make a resemblance to the concept car, they say. This isn't about that, though. This is about the possible brand, what we'll be calling them, as in, well, let me explain. Honda recently filed a trademark in Switzerland and in the European Union for the name Honda E. Honda E, in a category reserved for vehicles, according to hybridcars.com, says Mark Kane at Inside EVs. The new name Honda E suggests that Honda is going to be preparing a new sub-brand, or even the name of a model. We bet more likely on a sub-brand like the Audi e-tron, or the e-tron SUV, or the e-tron GT, the BMW i3, i4 next, i8, the Mercedes-Benz EQC, EQA, EQB. We know that the EQ brand, and when you see Lewis Hamilton's Formula One car, that Formula One testing started in Barcelona, by the way, today, and you might see some pictures online if you follow motorsport like I do, like motorsport.com or autosport.com, and you'll see EQ power on the side of Mercedes-Benz. That's because that's what they use for their electrification. Maybe that's what Honda are doing with Honda E. All right, one more story, and I think I'll get through it today. The Guardian today reported, one of many, many outlets reporting on this story, Honda planning to close its factory here in the UK, in somewhere called Sweden. They've been making cars for such a long time in the UK. Unions calling it a shattering body blow to the UK. It's already being linked to Brexit, as Great Britain is preparing to leave the EU. The Japanese car maker is expected to announce today it's planning to shut its Swindon plant within 3 years, putting 3,500 jobs at their only European production site at risk and threatening, well, many, many, many more in the supply chain. And it's really interesting, in my feed today, I stay out of the politics side of it, but people saying, wow, this is Brexit that's causing this. Other people saying, probably people who voted for Great Britain to leave, nothing to do with that. It's all about the slump in diesel engines. And, well, again, make your own mind up on that. I've said before on the podcast, people have criticised me for sharing. I know politics is like politics and religion and money, stay away from it. I've said it before on the podcast, I voted for Great Britain to stay in the EU because there was no sensible grown-up debate before we got to the vote all those years ago on what would happen. The vote very quickly, I think like all votes probably, descended into emotion and name-calling and ideologies, and people going, I believe we should leave and I believe we should stay. Why? Just because. And with a lack of any sensible debate, I didn't think the risk was worth it. So again, people say that, you shouldn't share that on the podcast because I disagree with you. Well, look, we can disagree and we can still be friends. And I didn't vote for ideological reasons. I voted to remain because I just didn't know what would happen. And therefore, I stay away from it because, as someone who said that before on the podcast, what I don't want anyone to do is to think that I'm like throwing these stories in in the face of anybody. This could be nothing to do, or it could be linked. It's too complex to be a single issue subject. So anyway, I'm sharing that because I'm honest with you with everything that I do, and it's fine. You and I can disagree. It's okay. We can still hang out. We can still be friends. Neither one has to be right or wrong. This isn't a black and white issue. There's too many shades of grey in this whole situation. So we'll see where that story ends up. Hey, let's talk about something positive. Your question of the week answers. Let's get to that, and then I'll leave you, and I'll hopefully be back tomorrow feeling better. Thanks to myev.com. Our question of the week this week is this: is there room for startup EV makers to succeed, or will the oncoming rush of models, particularly from those big German makers, from the established names, stifle the newcomers? Is there room for startup EV makers, or is it just too hard now that everyone's putting their billions behind it? Let me know your thoughts, and I genuinely want to know. You can email me hello@evnewsdaily.com. If you want to leave a comment on YouTube, Facebook, you can do. I've been a bit rubbish in the last 24 hours replying to emails and messages. I'm sorry, I've been a bit out of it. I'm going to get back to that backlog, I promise. Thank you very much to 184 patrons of the show who keep us going. Thank you to Phil Roberts at Electric Future. Thank you to Paul and the team at electricmotoring.net. If you're in Chicago, you can use electricmotoring.net to hire your Model 3s, your S's and X's. I like to Brad Crosby as well, my premium partner on the podcast. Thank you so much to everybody who supports me and bearing with me as we took a day off yesterday. 391 shows online for free in the archive, and the new ones you can get by hitting subscribe on your podcast platform, or the audio goes on YouTube as well. Come and say hi on the socials by searching EV News Daily. Do have a wonderful day. I'll catch you tomorrow. And remember, there's no such thing as a self-charging hybrid.